All right, well, thanks everyone for coming today. My name is Ben Zimmer. I'm the Executive Director of the Connecticut Policy Institute. And for those of you who aren't familiar with our organization, which may be many of you, as we're relatively new, we were established last year as a nonpartisan think tank on Connecticut state policy issues. As many of you probably know, there's a lot of political organizations and advocacy organizations in Connecticut on the right and left. And the idea behind the CPI was that the state needs an independent group doing nonpartisan policy research. We were founded by Tom Foley, who was the Republican governor candidate in 2010 here in Connecticut, but we have members, Democrats, Republicans, both on our board, and the essence of the organization is about policy research and good policy, not about politics. One of the ways that we aim to promote that goal and promote that mission is by hosting forums around the state on important issues in state and local government. So far this year, we've had forums in New Haven and Fairfield, and I'm very excited to have you all at what will be our first of many here in Hartford. And I think the iQuilt project is a fitting one for our first forum here in Hartford because it is both obviously a city project that is important and has high stakes for the city of Hartford, but it also is a good case study into the broader question of what is the appropriate role for government-sponsored urban development projects are in Connecticut cities, and what are the circumstances and characteristics of those projects needed to make them successful. Because that's the idea of this event, and that's really the idea of the CPI, is to be productive, forward-thinking, about good policy. And towards that end, we have a great lineup of panelists and a great moderator here today who I'll briefly introduce. First, from the city of Hartford, we have Tom Deller, who's the Director of Development Services for the city. In this role, he's the senior-most official in a variety of policy areas for the city, including economic development, housing, and planning. Tom came to Hartford just earlier this year, so a fellow relative newcomer to the Connecticut scene, but he does have very extensive experience in this area in Rhode Island, where he served in a variety of similar positions, including Director of Planning and Urban Development for the City of Providence, Deputy Executive Director for the Rhode Island Housing and Mortgage Finance Corporation, and is the planner for the City of East Providence. Next, from Yale University, we have Professor Alan Platus. Alan has spent more than 3 decades on the faculty at first Princeton, and then for the bulk of that time here in Connecticut at Yale, where he has taught and lectured and published widely on the history of cities and contemporary urbanism in the United States. He's also the founder of Yale's Urban Design Workshop, which focuses on consulting and advising cities both here in Connecticut and around the world on architecture and urban design. He's done some consulting for Stanford, for just talking, and he's been doing some work recently for Milford. His work is also involved China and Jordan, so it's really both local and global in its scale. Last but certainly not least, we have someone who many of you may know is a bit of a Hartford planning legend, Don Poland. Don has spent the last 17 years working on land use and community development issues here in the greater Hartford region, including as Director of Planning and Development for the town of East Windsor and as the Executive Director of the Neighborhoods of Hartford, a local non-for-profit. Don currently works as a private planning and development consultant, serving clients in Connecticut and around the country, and he also is a lecturer on urban geography and planning at CCSU, right nearby. And then finally, in addition to our 3 panelists, we have an outstanding moderator for today, Kara Sundlin. Kara is an Emmy Award-winning reporter and anchor for WFSB Channel 3 here in Hartford. She anchors their Eyewitness Noon at Noon. She's the co-host of the extremely popular show Better Connecticut. And she also has a very distinguished record as a reporter covering government and public policy. She reported live from Ground Zero after the September 11th terrorist attacks. She's traveled with local National Guard troops to Bosnia and Germany to cover their activities in the War on Terror. And as the Iraq War began, she was the only Connecticut reporter to report live from Washington, D.C. with exclusive interviews with local lawmakers who were obviously in Washington at the time. So it's our pleasure to have all four of them today, and our pleasure to have all of you here today. And with that, I'll hand things over to Kara.
Thank you, Ben, and thank you, the Connecticut Policy Institute, for creating this. I see a lot of friendly faces in the audience. The other thing that perhaps my bio, I think it does say there, but for those who don't know, I've been in Connecticut almost 13 years now, and all of them I've spent living in the city of Hartford. My husband, Dennis House, is also a resident here, so thank you. And I see a lot of friends out there. I want to get an idea of our crowd because we have such a distinguished panelist here, and I hope we can all learn a lot tonight. But clap, raise your hand if you are living in the city of Hartford right now. Everybody, most of you, okay? And the rest of you are just coming because you want to learn, okay? Or you work for the city somehow. So I think iQuilt is a really cool project that even us in the media are just getting our hands on. We saw in Vision Fest Hartford where people were coming downtown, and now iQuilt, a pretty lofty idea of how this could be remade. And so what I hope to do is moderate a discussion where we can all walk away and see what's realistic, what's not realistic, what matters to the people who live here, and from the experts maybe what would make the biggest difference. So thank you to our panelists for being here. I'm going to start with the first kind of a general question, which I think that a lot of us think, all right, I've heard about projects for Hartford before. And then we've had government-sponsored urban development projects from Constitution Plaza, the Civic Center, Riverfront Recapture, Adrian's Landing, and the results as far as getting private sector activity, getting people to move downtown, increase the vibrancy, have been mixed. There have been some good results and maybe not ones that people expected. Should this project, do you think from what you know of it right now, will this project be different? And let's start first with you, Thomas Deller. Who hails from Rhode Island, where we've seen Providence remade.
Thank you. So I have to answer the hard question first, and I was introduced as
and you all get to answer too.
Good. And I was also introduced as someone who's senior, so I guess that means I'm old and been around for a while. You know, we in government try to set the vision of where we want to go and what we want to try to achieve, and it's very hard in many ways. People think of us as creating these big projects and actually laying out a big project and trying to say this is what's going to make a difference. And I think that development and planning and city, it's an evolving thing, that it happens over time. And what we're trying to do through the iQuilt plan is actually set the vision of what we want to try to achieve, and trying to make Hartford, I almost slipped and said Providence, but Hartford, 20 years of Providence, I do that periodically. Try to make Hartford an exciting place. We're trying to use urban design to set a framework for attracting private investment, and trying to do it around the culture of what this city is, whether it's the arts, it's innovation, it's the walkability of the city. And so we're trying to create a strategy that makes our downtown spaces exciting and wants to draw people in. We're trying to create a strategy that has people think of Hartford in a different way, as a place where they want to come and enjoy it. It's trying to encourage the businesses that are here to invest in that belief and thought process that we've laid out through the iQuilt plan. You know, this plan is very different than many other plans that we've done. There are what I'll call the framework pieces and then the construction pieces. And the framework is really trying to talk about those things of walkability, innovation, culture, and how do we take those things and frame Hartford in a different way so that people think of us in that way and try to become a sense of place, and that our businesses like the Phoenix, who have to redo their roof at their building, create a green plaza instead of just the hard concrete. Or that the travelers, when they renovate their building, change their plaza so that it becomes more pedestrian friendly and a place where we can get together and have events. So it's setting that framework for both public and private investment. On the investment side, we're trying to think about how people can come into the city, enjoy the city, and move about. So we talk about the green walk. We talk about transit and how we make transit better so people can flow in and through the city and get from point A to point B. We talk about revitalizing and making Bushnell Park a better and more exciting place. We talk about how we can connect the parks to the existing developments. So while there is a plan that talks about if we can find the money, we will do the following things, it's more of a framework document that talks about how we want to grow this city and change the city. And while we start in the downtown, ultimately, it's a citywide connection. We have to connect to the neighborhoods. We have to connect to the art venues and the things that are happening in the neighborhood. And so it's really about that kind of connection. So it is very different than a Constitution Plaza. It is not a heavy investment on the government side. It's trying to think about how we all take the money that we are investing in our existing developments, whether it's private or public, and move forward this concept of connecting people to our arts, our innovation, our green spaces.
Thank you. Alan, I'd like to hear what you have to say.
First of all, as an architect, I have to say the acoustics in here suck.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to try to whisper into this mic because I'm painfully aware that it's hard to hear each other, but I hope if people in the back of the room or wherever can't hear, wave your hand, and we'll try to adjust a little bit. Secondly, I want to say that it's really encouraging to see this many people here for this kind of discussion. I've followed from a distance, but not too far a distance, the development of this plan, and I've seen online at least, and read the reports of many of the public sessions that have taken place over the last year or so. And I think you should be aware that from my perspective as a community designer, planner, organizer, just the very fact that this process has engaged so many people means that in one very important respect, it is already a success. One of the goals of an effective planning process is not just to produce results with dollar signs in front of them, or pretty buildings, or beautiful streetscape, but to revitalize the involvement of the local community, because without your buy-in, without participation, whether you're skeptical or wildly enthusiastic, the fact that you're interested and engaged and not just bystanders in the process is enormously important. The next thing I want to do is maybe a little bit academic, and so I'll put on my professorial hat briefly, and that's to try to make a crisp distinction between a project and a plan. Because the question that was posed to us was, all these projects that we've seen, some have been okay, some didn't do what they promised, they failed in one way or another. That's what happens with projects. Projects are a specific development with usually a specific development horizon. You take them to the bank and get funding for them. If the bank's smart, they get their money back. If they're not, they may fail along with the project. Often happens. Developers can tell you what the track record is, and it's pretty, even when things are going well, it's not always so inspiring. But a plan, as I think Tom was discussing really, is a framework. It is something that allows you to understand over time the role that individual projects play in building your city, your community. It puts them in their place. It helps you to understand what the criteria should be for their contribution to a larger vision. And so while we may pay for plans as a process, we may pay consultants, we may get grants to do planning. That doesn't mean that they are the same kind of animal at all as a project. So I think if we keep that in mind, we'll have a more constructive discussion. That doesn't mean that plans can't be held to very serious critical standards, but those standards are different, I think, than the ones that we might apply as citizens, as developers, as bankers, as public officials to projects. And then finally, before I pass it over to Don so we can really have a discussion, I want to say also on behalf of our field that good urbanism takes time. When I got into the design profession, people would distinguish for me between architecture and landscape architecture by saying that at least in architecture, you usually got to live to see your buildings realized. Of course, in some cases, you get to live to see them torn down. I have many friends now, I've been around long enough, that are starting to see their buildings coming down, for better or for worse. But landscape architecture, it's only your grandchildren who actually see the maturity of your project. So I often wondered how Frederick Law Olmsted, for example, felt as he planned these wonderful park systems that were built all over the country. And we might want to talk more about the kind of planning that was anyway. But one thing's certain, he didn't live long enough to see them in their glory. He had to visualize and help people visualize what they could be as that landscape matures. Urban design is, in different ways, a little bit like that as well. And just to give you two prominent examples, one close to home, the 9th Square project that Peter Newman's office was involved with as master planner. First of all, it took 10 years to really get it developed. From 1986 to 1996 before people actually started moving. A very complicated project. And then people wailed and moaned for a long time about the fact that none of the retail space was leased. It had to be given away at first. But people started moving into the housing units, and now, 30 years later, we think of it as one of the great success stories of urban planning and urban design in the city of New Haven, contributing in a significant way to the revitalization of the whole downtown area and providing a kind of paradigm-changing model of what needed to happen to old industrial cities like New Haven if they were going to revitalize. They couldn't just keep building malls. They couldn't just keep building parking garages. They had to bring people back into the city by doing housing, and then the retail and other things would come along. So it took time, and I know the developer of that, Richard Barron, out of St. Louis very well, and I've heard his war stories. And there were times when he was ready not just to quit, but to do something more violent to himself over that project. It was so slow in development. The other project that I had some personal experience of that may surprise you is South Beach in Miami. That old Art Deco neighborhood was, if any of you are old enough to remember, have been down there in the 60s and 70s, it was flop houses. It was devalued real estate and architecture with the poorest of the poor, the marginal characters in Miami who just sort of squatted there for the most part. And I was taken through it in the late 70s by an amazing woman named Barbara Bear Capitman, who was about the only person in Miami at the time who thought Art Deco architecture was worth anything. The other person was her son, who was foolish enough to become the developer for the first few revived Art Deco hotels in South Beach. He went bankrupt. Now, of course, that's some of the most expensive real estate on the East Coast. And everybody loves it. It's hip, it's cool, it's what, vibrant, diverse urbanism should be, at least in a warm climate. So the point I'm making is that not only does good urbanism take a while, it sometimes bombs on the way. In fact, I don't want to suggest this, but maybe one of the criteria for a successful planned urban development project is that it goes through at least one cycle of bankruptcy. I'm not predicting that for the iQuilt.
Not encouraging developers.
So the real conclusion you should draw from that is that good urban design doesn't necessarily only respond to the current market. It anticipates future markets, and in some cases it actually creates its own market.
Thank you so much, Alan. And Donald?
Thank you. Actually, I want to start off with one. Most of you who know me know that I've been fairly critical of the iQuilt plan. I'm not sure that everyone actually always listens to what I'm saying. And I hope I have a chance to kind of explain my perspectives here a little bit. First and foremost, I can't disagree with the comments of either one of the other panelists here, and I think they both described these issues pretty well. But I want to start off playing off of something Alan said related to the fact that there's no simple solutions and there's always conflicts in the perspectives. And he brought up the 9 squares in New Haven and kind of the success of the 9 squares and the innovation of the 9 squares and the plan of the 9 squares. The fact is, Hartford's Reverend Horace Bushnell actually hated the 9 squares and criticized the 9 squares, thought that the grid was the most awful form of urban development, and he actually went further to say that New Haven got it right when it moved beyond the 9 squares and actually started introducing streets that had angles to them and or were curvilinear. So the fact is there's a long history here of kind of perspectives and how we approach these things. With the question being, should we expect something different from the iQuilt and these other projects? I think it's a mixed answer. It's both yes and no. There's a lot of aspects, or many aspects of the iQuilt plan that are not like other projects. This is not an Adrian's Landing project. This is not a Constitution Plaza project. It's not a kind of, if we just build it, they will come. But I think, from my perspective, there are aspects of this that leave me frustrated. And in the work I do, I like to think I do more strategy than I actually do planning. And while plans are important and visions are important, I think we need to connect the dots. So I usually start by asking, A, what issues is it that we are trying to solve? B, what are the outcomes we hope to achieve? Then evaluate the existing conditions, and then create the strategies to move us towards those outcomes. And when I look at the iQuilt plan, page 5 of it, the cover letter actually says the goal is to make the Connecticut's capital city more culturally vibrant, environmentally sustainable, and economically prosperous. I'm going to focus on economic prosperity here in my discussions because it's what I do most. And when I look at that as the goal of the plan, I don't see a connection of the dots. I don't see how implementing specific aspects of the plan assure us that we will achieve these outcomes, and that's where I end up being concerned. So rather than if economic prosperity is an issue facing the city, if 30% Class A office vacancy is an issue facing the downtown, if 240,000 square feet of vacant storefront is a problem facing downtown, I don't see how the iQuilt plan gets us to that recovery. And what I mean is, I don't want to say that there should be a guarantee. There are no guarantees. But there's no rational nexus between what it is we are doing and what I actually see as the economic issues that actually face the downtown. With that said, I want to make it clear, everything in the iQuilt plan, I think, could play a significant role in a strategy to economically revive downtown and make it a more competitive place. The wayfinding stuff is spectacular. I very much support it. The Envision Fest, the programming, very much critical. But how we actually connect that to an economically prosperous downtown, I don't see it coming out of this plan. I think there needs to be more to it. And that's where, one, if it was just put forward as an urban design plan, my comments over the past few years would probably be less harsh. It's when I've seen the PowerPoint presentations along the way talk about it being an economic development plan. Now that's been dropped, I think, from the actual language of it. But there is still this link to the goals of economic prosperity. So I think we have to be more intentional and more purposeful in our actions when we have limited resources and limited abilities to address the problems of downtown. I'll stop there.
Okay. So I think it might be useful, I just would like to know from the crowd, how many of you actually have looked at the iQuilt plan and know maybe some of the basic tenets of what it seeks to do? Okay. So there's a good amount of you have and some that haven't. One of the next questions is going to be, we're hoping to get to $100 million. Right now we've got $23 million already allocated. So where do we allocate the resources? So I'm just going to run down, so we can all be on the same page, some of the ideas, and that's not to make, go to iQuilt's website and you'll see a lot more, but so that we can address these, and hopefully our panelists can say what they think is worthy. Some of what we're focusing on, the wayfinding infrastructure, which you mentioned, those are the signs, cultural markers, those are already up in many places. Gold Street, narrowing and realigning the street. Bushnell Park North, redesigning the roadways, sidewalks, crossings to encourage walking. Bushnell Gardens, expanding the park to get a new garden area. Main Street, you would modify sidewalks, crosswalks, make it more pedestrian. Pulaski Circle, reconfigure it so it's more narrow, again, more pedestrian friendly. In the east end of Bushnell Park, expanding on what I personally think has been a success anyway with the skating rink, bring a lot of people down, but you would see more, an ice skating rink, food kiosk, a giant chest perhaps. Connecticut Square, turning the parking lot into an event space for festivals, maybe like you've seen in Newport or in Providence. New brook and bridges, making a man-made brook. That's the big one that the media keeps talking about, putting water back through Bushnell Park. We know Providence relocated its river. Whether or not water is important, that's one of the most expensive items, $31 million. Tower Square, resurfacing the plaza, adding tables and chairs, making it a more outdoor space, and more renovation to the park with new trees, lighting. The ranges in cost go from something relatively small in a project like this, $1 million for the signs, to again $31 million for putting the water in. So having said that, we know that there's a lot of planning projects out there. What are the relative merits, do you think? Where do we start? Given the cost and the potential payoff, and I'd like to moderate this to keep it going, could you all give me maybe your top 3, what you think should happen? And then tell me what you really don't like. So let's start, we'll keep it in the same order, starting with Thomas.
You know, I would say that there are a lot of proposals in the plan, and I think one of the important things to realize is this is a plan. These are ideas of what we may want to try to achieve, what we may want to move forward. They all have costs associated with them. What we have to do is we have to take this document, which is, I'm going to say, call it a 30,000-foot document, talking about possibilities, and we need to go through and start testing it and verifying it with the people of the city. We need to go out and analyze how we achieve each of these and whether it makes sense to achieve them. We are doing a bunch of the things right now. Through the Tiger grant, through the $23 million for Tiger, we're going to be doing Bushnell Park North. We're going to be doing some of the traffic calming, some of the transit approaches, some of the work on Main Street. We're going to be moving Gold Street. So there's a lot of things that are already happening. But we need to go back and, as I said, test all these things, understand what they really cost, how we make them happen, if we want to make them happen, and test them to the public. So Tiger is obviously number 1. We have to get that done. To me, number 2 is really, probably the big number 2 is really thinking about, and it's probably 2 and 3, Bushnell Park, revitalizing it, bringing it back, making it more of a place, making those connections, and I think that's where I'm going to start.
Now, just to follow up, because you have experience in Providence, and full disclosure for those who don't know, my father was governor during the time of Providence Renaissance, and I remember hearing the stories at home. He and Buddy Stancy going to the family of Nordstrom and really selling it. I mean, it took a state and city organization of, you know, everyone was on the same page, and more than that, they were ready to do whatever it took to try and really put some energy into it. Obviously, moving the water in Providence was important. You have water fire, you have all these beautiful things. Downtown doesn't roll up at 5 o'clock anymore. Do you think getting some water back into the city is really important?
Wow. So now I got to be careful what I say here because there's people here that I work with who want the water. Is the water important? I think not necessarily. I think that, you know, each city has what's special and unique about it, and you know, Providence had covered up its water and hidden it, and we reached an agreement. We had a plan similar to iQuilt that talked about where we wanted to go in the city, and everyone bought into that. And it took us 20 years to move the Northeast Rail Corridor, move the rivers, and move Interstate 195. I mean, those are things that we did in Providence. It took us time, but we had agreement, and we all believed that was the most important thing. What we have to do on the waterway, bringing back the Park River, is we really need to understand what that's going to cost, what it does for us economically, and whether that's a vital piece. And that's what I talk about when I say we have to prove it.
You're not uncovering it, you're actually going to put it in, because it's not like Providence where it was just there underneath. You would actually install it.
Well, we actually moved it in Providence.
Yeah.
It was underneath and we moved it to a different location. What we're going to do, what the intent is really to uncover or bring out some of the Gully Brook and put it back to where the river used to be years ago. So we need to prove that, we need to do that analysis to determine A, what's the cost, and really meet with the residents of the city and see if everyone buys into that and if it makes sense. And if it does, then we have to figure out how to do it. So we have to, I'm not going to say it's important at this point because I don't know enough about it. If I look at a plan and I look at the potential of life that it could bring back, it's got a lot of possibilities. You know, whoever thought that we'd have fire on water in Providence and drive thousands of people to the downtown, spending lots of money and creating lots of economic growth. Never thought that would happen. And I still remember when the artist Barnaby Evans came in and proposed that we sort of all looked at him and said, fire on water with classical music?
And if you haven't been there, you have to see it. It's incredible. And it's packed every weekend that they do it.
It's a huge event.
Alan, water certainly is pretty. What do you think?
Well, just to remind you, Cleveland had fire on water in 1970, the Cuyahoga River burned. It was a little different. Yeah, no artists involved, as far as we know. You know, rather than rank my top choices, because I'm not a Hartford person, and I think that's your privilege and right and responsibility to evaluate the specific projects, but I want to say what I think the two important parts of this framework are. And one is very generic, and that's walkability. Now that sounds maybe a little bit trivial, and you know, we talk about the impact of, let's say, bicycle access on cities like Seattle and Portland, which have had huge success, not because of their climate, of course, but one of the things that people, particularly young people, perceive about those cities is that they're enormously bicycle friendly. And they've been able to tap into a huge market for that. And I think that's only going to be more important for more cities. It's more difficult for some places than others. And in the downtown areas of cities, bicycle access is maybe not the thing you're talking about. You're talking about probably a degree of walkability. Is this a kind of pie-in-the-sky, frivolous, feel-good sort of thing? Well, no, there have been some serious studies done by people like Todd Littman, who's on the National Transit Policy Board and runs a think tank in Victoria, British Columbia on transportation issues, on the economic impact of walkability on urban development. And it turns out to be pretty significant. There have also been some specific studies done on the impact of walkability on housing values in inner city urban neighborhoods. And not everywhere, but in many places, that turns out to be pretty significant as well, if you can pull it off. Now, is it Hartford's thing? I think that the plan is right. When you look at Hartford, one of its structural assets, in addition to all the wonderful institutions, is its compact downtown area. It's very small compared to a lot of downtowns. And so I think this may be a real opportunity. Will it bring back Class A office occupancy? I doubt it. I think the impact will be in other ways. And by the way, small to medium-sized cities are not going, in our lifetime, I think, to ever again be the regional centers for Class A office space. New York, Boston, San Francisco, yes, their downtowns will still compete in that marketplace. But I think the bad news, but news that we need to work with and accept, is that that's not what's going to by itself revitalize our downtowns. More likely going to be their livability as residential live-work neighborhoods. And in New Haven, for example, we now are in the top 5 nationally of cities in terms of the percentage of people who walk to work. 13.5% of the people in New Haven walk to work. 14% in Berkeley, for God's sake. Much higher, yes, in Manhattan. Hartford, I think, is still down around about 5.8%. Now, walking to work is not just walkability. It's having places you can live within proximity of walking to work, but without the walkability, it doesn't work very well either. The other thing is you need something special. And what's significant about the Providence River example is it's become a signature item. It's the identity around which the revitalization of the city's been built. Is it for every city? I don't know. San Antonio, by the way, did it back in the 1930s. So it's not a new idea, and it's continued to work for San Antonio. I think in Providence, they spent about $146 million over a decade on bringing the river back. And in the first year after all of that was done, the hotel occupancy rates in Providence doubled. Now, was that a direct connection? I don't know, but I know Providence over time not as well as Tom does, and I know that it was both psychologically and literally a huge shot in the arm. So I think as you think about your priorities, you need to look for those elements, or even element that will be special and unique and galvanizing for Hartford. I don't know automatically what it is. It might be water. I think it's more likely Bushnell Park itself, and the feeling that it's not just an isolated island, but a kind of nebula that reaches out, the way the plan envisions, into a lot more of the downtown area. It's a very special place, historically, in a contemporary, it could be more in a contemporary sense. That's my guess.
So, Donald, let me ask you, because I know that you yourself said you've been critical of the plan. Is there something, number one, you really like about it? And number two, if there's one thing that's really missing from it, in your opinion?
I guess starting with the missing, I kind of think of, in some ways I've thought of it as maybe somewhat of a just distraction. I know that's kind of a harsh phrase to use, but it's been about 4 years in the making. I think we've spent about $500,000 on the design and creation of it. And during that time, we've seen these economic challenges within downtown. So I don't see us doing studies there, studying Class A, Class B, and Class C office markets. I don't see us digging into the challenges of ground floor storefronts. I don't see us looking at the true connections or the true economic challenges of the neighborhoods, so the connection of downtown to the neighborhoods. I don't see us doing a lot of things, so that's kind of where that concern is. On what I like about it, like I said, it's the soft stuff, it's the little stuff, it's the programming, it's the wayfinding, it's not the big grand plans. When they talk about, when the two of them actually I think brought up, or at least Alan did, brought up Bushnell Park as being this asset, I truly believe the park is an asset. It's an amazing park, and it's actually very well designed. I actually don't see anything wrong with its current design. What I see the problem with Bushnell Park being is its maintenance. We cannot actually maintain it to the level it should be maintained. If it's the crown jewel of the city, then it should be maintained meticulously like the mall in DC. And right now, it's actually, and I hate to say this because I love the park, but its condition is marginal at best. I recently had someone from the suburbs tell me they love bringing their child to the carousel every Sunday after church. It's a reward if the child's good at church, they bring it to the carousel. And how it pains them that the kid wants to go and play in the little playground next to it, but it's filled with litter and it's dirty. And they always have to tell the kid, no, you can't actually go over there and play because they're actually fearful of it. So why are we talking about spending $30 million to recreate some type of brook or water feature in the park when we can't maintain the existing pond that's there? Why are we talking about expanding Bushnell Park up through the Gold Street area, making a larger green space for maintenance, when once again, we can't maintain the existing facility? So I think we need to kind of shift to different questions or maybe look at it differently. If you could show me that A, we can maintain the park to the highest standards right now, and B, show me that you can guarantee maintenance of this redesign moving forward, then I'd probably be less critical. But in this context, it kind of, causes me to question, what is the value? What is the value of spending $30 million based on the existing conditions?
So, and that is a big price tag for moving the water. I'll just add one anecdote. I just went to a birthday party. For those of you who don't know, the carousel does birthday parties for little kids. So I went there. That actually wasn't my experience. I might have had a good day. And I think sometimes, for all of us who use the park a lot, we know sometimes it looks good, and sometimes it really doesn't look good. So maybe that's a city thing that we need to plan on when the litter's getting picked up and make sure they're there, especially on the weekends when it's getting most of the suburban use. When I actually went to this birthday party, we did go to that playground afterward because it was a beautiful day, and I hadn't spent much time there before, and it was fine. And my kids loved it, and I was like, oh, we should come here more often. But I agree with you, it's maybe just being more consistent, and we need to make sure we're, Sunday mornings after a night of partying in the city, there can be litter left there till Monday, so I hear what you're saying.
Fair enough, I get that, but if you also just look at the running that exists next to the sidewalks, from vehicles driving in the park, whether they're visitors to the park or whether they're city maintenance vehicles, You know, they're wider than the sidewalks themselves. So the areas next to the sidewalks, the grass gets destroyed, it becomes dirt, it gets muddy, it gets turned over. The fact is, I don't think it should be a question of, you know, there's good days and bad days, or we need to improve maintenance. There should be no question about maintenance. It should be a highly maintained park. It should be maintained.
Thomas, are we working on that? Is there some plan that we're improving the maintenance?
Okay, let me say, since we're in a library, let me say and I apologize to the librarians in the audience or those within earshot, but you know, the librarian's ideal of a well-maintained library is one where nobody reads any books, because as soon as you allow people to handle the books and use them, they get messed up, they deteriorate. So, you know, I've never seen a really fine, valuable public space that isn't at some points in its life cycle pretty messed up. And that doesn't mean it's neglected or that it's not being taken care of or that people don't care about it. It means it's being used. And there's some pretty rough spaces, you know, in pretty grand public parks. The bigger, the more there is. I think your answer, and it's not an answer that I can quantify in terms of how much you need to spend on it. I think with public spaces like Bushnell Park, you need to overcome a kind of passive attitude about it to get to the point where people claim it and there's a constituency for it, and you can build what really is the model now for maintenance of parks and public spaces, which is a public-private partnership. I mean, New York is, I suppose, the poster child for that, starting with the Central Park Conservancy. You know, Central Park was a pretty rough place back in the 60s as well, and what turned the tables was not simply a massive infusion of public money, but actually the sense of ownership that people around the park took in that park. Bryant Park is a spectacular example of a more commercialized public-private partnership. Maybe not such a bad thing for Bryant Park. I don't know about Bushnell Park. And then finally, the most spectacular public space really that's been created in the United States in recent years, and the one that stimulated the most economic development, even though that was not its intention at all, is the High Line in New York, which was totally a private, private initiated venture, and then became a private-public partnership. It's now the place, no longer Times Square, where everybody who visits New York, certainly from Europe, wants to go to the High Line. Every city in the country, if not the world, wants a High Line. That's what I mean by a kind of unique feature. They bring with them their own maintenance strategy because they inspire people to get involved. And if you're in a position where the only recourse for your best public space is to just hope that the city will pump more time and money into it, then you're probably in a bad place to begin with. And so connecting to more people, which is the intention, I take it, of the iQuilt plan, is probably not a bad thing.
I know we have a lot of questions to get to, but if you just comment briefly on a plan that you...
I just want to make two comments about the park maintenance issue. One is, one of the things we spent a lot of time in Providence is when we designed our parks is trying to think about the ease of maintenance. I've found often that we'll get a designer that comes in and there'll be specialty materials or something that is so hard to maintain or hard to get your hands on, or they don't think about the width of the sidewalk and the fact that a maintenance vehicle will be driving down it. So what we need to do is we need to think practical about the design. Yes, we want a great design, but we want to make sure that sidewalk is wide enough so if a truck has to drive down it, it's not leaving ruts on the side. We have to think about the fact that it's got, while we want great design and great materials, it should be things that we can acquire easily. Because if we do the specialty things, it's going to get broken and we can't maintain it because it costs too much. Mm-hmm. That's one issue. And I want to build a little on what Alan said about the adoption of parks and things like that. When my kids were in Little League, we always went to the ballpark with trash bags and latex gloves because we picked up the trash. And after a while, other people started picking up the trash. And then after a while, the parks were clean. People didn't throw on the ground anymore because all of a sudden they were embarrassed to throw something on the ground and another parent came and picked it up. Mm-hmm. So there's a certain amount of responsibility that we, as the citizens of Hartford, have to take onto ourselves to maintain the property. We can't expect the city to do everything.
Right, I get that. I want to move on from the maintenance issues of the park and talk about, it's come up about the idea that we should take private responsibility, and that makes sense. It's a public park, and we should all take ownership of it. But also, in order for this to work, we do have to have private sector investment, interest. I'm struck, I think of someone like Richard Gordon,